Victoria Whitmore sat motionless at table 12, watching the clock like it was counting out her humiliation. 37 minutes. Her wine had gone flat, her meal untouched. The last text from Marcus read simply, "On my way," before going silent. She stood, pulling her coat tight, forcing herself to look calm, until a quiet voice beside her broke through. "Excuse me. Would you like to share the table?" She looked up to see a single father shielding his daughter's hand like he was shielding the whole world. The day had been brutal even before the restaurant. Victoria had spent 6 hours in a boardroom war, the executive council pushing her to sign off on a development deal that made her stomach turn. Buy out a residential neighborhood at rock-bottom prices, displace families who'd lived there for generations, erect luxury condos that would stand empty as investments. The numbers worked. The optics didn't. She'd left that meeting feeling like she needed to remember what it was like to be human, not just a signature on acquisition papers. That's why she'd agreed to meet Marcus Reed tonight. He'd been introduced through mutual connections as someone who understood her world, someone who could handle the pressure of dating a woman whose face appeared in financial magazines. Someone, they said, who saw her as more than a trophy or a business opportunity. The restaurant she'd chosen was deliberate. No paparazzi camping outside. No business associates who might interrupt with merger talk. Just a family-owned Italian place in a quiet neighborhood. The kind of spot where normal people came for anniversaries and birthday dinners. She wanted, for once, to feel like one of them. Marcus had suggested somewhere more upscale, but she'd insisted. She should have known then. 10 minutes in, the first text arrived. Traffic on the bridge. She'd nodded to herself, ordered water, studied the menu she already knew by heart. 20 minutes in, another message. Accident causing delays. The waiter had approached twice, asking gently if she'd like to order an appetizer while she waited. She declined, smile tight, aware of the glances from other tables. At 30 minutes, she saw it. Not a text about traffic or accidents, but a social media story from someone she vaguely knew. There was Marcus, clearly visible in the background of a downtown bar, drink in hand, laughing with a group she didn't recognize. The timestamp read 18 minutes ago. She'd stared at her phone, a cold understanding settling over her. This wasn't traffic. This was a test. Or worse, just plain indifference. She was successful, powerful, wealthy, and apparently, still someone who could be left waiting at a table like she didn't matter. The shame of it burned hotter than anger. She could buy this restaurant. She could buy the whole block. But she couldn't buy the one thing she'd wanted tonight, to not be alone. Victoria started gathering her things, mind already composing the calm, dignified exit. She'd leave cash on the table for the wine she hadn't drunk, walk out with her head high, and tomorrow, Marcus would get a single-line text that she was no longer interested. Clean. Professional. Utterly empty. That's when she heard the voice. Across the restaurant, Henry Carter was counting bills from his wallet with the kind of careful precision that spoke of too many months where every dollar mattered. His daughter Emma sat across from him, 8 years old and watching her father with eyes that saw everything. Henry had gotten a rejection email that morning. The manufacturing plant position he'd been sure about, the one that would have meant health insurance, and maybe even a chance to save for Emma's future, they'd gone with someone else. Someone with a degree, they said, even though Henry could fix anything they put in front of him and had 15 years of experience to prove it. Emma had asked him that afternoon, voice small, if they could go out to dinner. Just once. Like Mom used to do. And Henry, who'd been about to suggest sandwiches at the park, had looked at his daughter's hopeful face and couldn't say no. The restaurant wasn't fancy, but it wasn't cheap either. He'd chosen it because it was near the bus stop, because it was safe, because the online menu showed prices he could just barely manage if he was careful. One meal for Emma. One for himself. Maybe a small dessert to split if she finished her vegetables. He watched Emma now as she studied the menu with exaggerated seriousness, her finger tracing the words she was still learning to read. She was wearing her best dress, the blue one with flowers that was getting too small, but she refused to give up. Her hair was pulled back in a ponytail he'd learned to do from online tutorials. Not perfect, but neat enough. Henry had ordered the cheapest entrees, smiled when the waiter brought bread, and carefully folded his napkin into the shape of a paper crane to make Emma giggle. These were the moments he lived for, the tiny pockets of joy he could still give her, even when everything else felt like it was falling apart. That's when Emma looked past him, and her expression shifted. "Daddy," she whispered, "that lady over there is all by herself. Did someone leave her?" Henry followed his daughter's gaze to table 12, where a woman in an expensive coat sat alone, phone dark on the table, staring at nothing. Even from this distance, he could see the tension in her shoulders, the way she was holding herself together through sheer will. "Don't stare, sweetheart," Henry said gently, but he couldn't look away either. There was something in the woman's posture that he recognized, the specific kind of loneliness that came from being left behind. He'd felt it himself 2 years ago when Emma's mother walked out, when he'd had to explain to a 6-year-old that sometimes people leave, and it's not because you did anything wrong. Emma tugged his sleeve. She looked sad. She did. And suddenly Henry was thinking about all the times someone had shown him kindness when he needed it most. The neighbor who'd brought groceries when he lost his job. The teacher who stayed late to help Emma with reading. The stranger at the laundromat who'd given him quarters when the machine ate his last dollar. Their table had 2 empty seats. It was a small thing. Maybe an unwelcome thing. But standing up and walking away felt worse than the risk of embarrassment. Henry pushed back his chair before he could overthink it. Emma's eyes went wide. He walked the few steps to table 12, heart hammering, painfully aware of his worn work boots and the fraying cuff of his jacket. Victoria was reaching for her purse when a shadow fell across her table. She looked up, defensive walls already rising, expecting the waiter with another pitying offer to take her order. Instead, she found herself looking at a man about her age, maybe slightly older, with kind eyes and calloused hands clasped nervously in front of him. Behind him stood a little girl peering around his legs with unfiltered curiosity. "Excuse me," the man said, voice quiet and respectful. "I don't mean to intrude, but if you're not waiting for someone, our table has extra room. You're welcome to join us if you'd like." Victoria's first instinct was automatic refusal. She didn't need charity. She didn't need pity from strangers. The words "I'm fine" were already forming when the little girl stepped forward. "You looked lonely," Emma said with the devastating honesty only children possess. "You can sit with us. We're celebrating." "Emma?" Henry said softly, but there was no reprimand in it. Victoria looked between them. The man wasn't leering or trying to impress her. There was no agenda in his face, no calculation. And the child? She was looking at Victoria like she was just another person who might need kindness, not a CEO or a failed date or anything other than someone sitting alone. When was the last time anyone had looked at her that way? "What are you celebrating?" Victoria heard herself ask. Emma beamed. "Daddy took me out for dinner, just because." Something cracked in Victoria's chest. She glanced at their table, saw the modest meals, the careful way everything was arranged. This wasn't a family with money to spare. This was a father stretching his budget to make his daughter smile. And he was offering her a seat anyway. "I'd like that," Victoria said, surprising herself. "Thank you." Henry's relief was visible. He helped carry her wine glass over, Emma chattering the whole way about how she'd never shared a table with a stranger before, and wasn't this exciting. Victoria found herself settling into a chair that was slightly wobbly, at a table that was slightly too small, feeling more real than she had in months. "I'm Henry," the man said, once they were settled. "This is Emma." Victoria ... She almost added her last name, then stopped. Tonight, she was just Victoria. The waiter appeared, confused but accommodating, adjusting their orders and bringing an extra place setting. Emma narrated her menu choices with elaborate detail. She was getting chicken parmesan because it had cheese and chicken and sauce all together, and didn't that sound perfect? Victoria found herself agreeing that it did indeed sound perfect. "What do you do, Victoria?" Henry asked, the polite small talk of strangers. She hesitated. The truth would change everything. It always did. "I work in an office," she said finally. "Lots of meetings. Lots of decisions." "What about you?" "I fix things," Henry replied. "Equipment, electrical systems, whatever breaks down. I work maintenance mostly." "Daddy can fix anything," Emma announced proudly. "He fixed my bike and the toaster and Mrs. Patterson's sink." "No, so. Sounds like you're good at what you do," Victoria said to Henry, and meant it. He shrugged, uncomfortable with praise. "I do my best." The conversation flowed easier than it had any right to. Emma asked Victoria if she had a family, and Victoria found herself admitting she didn't. Not really. Her parents were alive but distant, her siblings caught up in their own lives. Emma, with a child's logic, declared that Victoria could be their friend then, and friends were kind of like family. Victoria watched Henry cut the best portion of his chicken and slide it onto Emma's plate without a word, keeping the smaller piece for himself. She watched him fold his napkin into increasingly elaborate shapes to make his daughter laugh. She watched him listen to Emma's rambling story about her day at school, with the kind of attention that suggested nothing else in the world mattered more. When was the last time someone had paid attention to her that way? Not to Victoria Whitmore, CEO. Just to her. Do you ever feel like people only see what they want to see? Victoria asked suddenly, the wine making her bold. Like they look at you and they've already decided who you are. Henry was quiet for a moment. Every day, he said finally. People look at my work clothes and they think they know my whole story. But they don't know about Emma. They don't know about the things that actually matter. You were waiting for someone, Emma said, connecting dots with a child's directness. Did they not come? Emma? That's personal, Henry started, but Victoria shook her head. No, it's okay. Yes, I was waiting for someone. He didn't show up. That's mean, Emma pronounced with finality. You're nice. He should have come. Victoria felt tears prick her eyes and blinked them back hard. Thank you, Emma. Henry's phone buzzed. He glanced at it, then at Victoria. I'm sorry, he said quietly. That must have hurt. It was the simplest acknowledgement, no platitudes about how she deserved better or how it was his loss. Just recognition that, yes, it hurt. And somehow that made it bearable. The worst part, Victoria found herself saying, is feeling stupid for hoping. She stopped, shocked at her own honesty. She never talked like this. Never showed vulnerability. But there was something about this table, these people, that made her usual armor feel unnecessary. That's when her phone lit up with a video call. Marcus's name flashed on the screen. Victoria stared at it for 3 rings before answering. His face filled the screen, background noise of music and laughter obvious behind him. Hey babe, he said, words slightly slurred. Sorry about tonight. I had a small accident. Had to get the car. You're at a bar, Victoria said flatly. What? No, this is just, I can see you, Marcus. I can hear the music. You're not in a hospital or on the side of the road. You're at a bar downtown. His expression shifted. Caught. Look. Something came up. Business networking. You understand how it is. I understand, perfectly. Victoria's voice could have frozen steel. Don't call me again. She ended the call before he could respond, set her phone face down on the table. Her hands were shaking. Emma and Henry sat in careful silence. Then Emma reached across and patted Victoria's hand with sticky child fingers. At least you're not alone now, she said simply. Victoria looked at this little girl, this stranger who'd shown her more kindness in an hour than Marcus had shown in months. No, she said softly. I'm not alone now. Henry didn't pry, didn't ask questions. He just quietly pushed a glass of water closer to her and changed the subject to something lighter. They finished their meal talking about small things, Emma's favorite subjects in school, Henry's proudest repair jobs, Victoria's confession that she'd never learned to ride a bike. Emma insisted this was a tragedy that must be remedied immediately, which made them all laugh. When the check came, Victoria reached for her purse. Please, let me. No, Henry said firmly but kindly. Thank you, but no. I'm the one who intruded on your celebration, Victoria protested. You didn't intrude. You joined us. Henry's smile was gentle. And honestly, having you here tonight, you made Emma happy. That's worth more than you splitting a bill. Victoria understood then. This wasn't about money or who could afford what. This was about dignity. About Henry being able to provide for his daughter and share something with a stranger without it becoming a transaction. She backed down, respecting that boundary. Then thank you. For the seat at your table. I needed it more than I knew. Any time, Henry said, and sounded like he meant it. They walked out together into the cool evening air. The parking lot was nearly empty, streetlights casting long shadows. Henry and Emma were heading to the bus stop. Victoria's car sat in solitary luxury near the entrance. "Will you be okay getting home?" Henry asked, always thinking of others first. "I'll be fine," Victoria assured him. She crouched down to Emma's level. "Thank you for sharing your daddy with me tonight. You're very lucky to have him." "I know," Emma said seriously. Then she hugged Victoria quickly, fiercely, before Henry could tell her not to hug strangers. Victoria found herself hugging back, breathing in the scent of children's shampoo and innocence. They didn't exchange numbers, didn't make promises to stay in touch. It was just a moment, crystallized and perfect, and then they went their separate ways. Henry and Emma disappeared into the bus shelter. Victoria sat in her car for a long moment before starting the engine. She'd remember this night. The worn table. The paper crane Henry had left behind. The way Emma's laughter had sounded like hope. The question that had saved her from drowning in humiliation. "Would you like to share the table?" 2 weeks later, Victoria stood in her executive office 60 floors above the city, reviewing the residential displacement project one final time before the site inspection. The paperwork was immaculate. The legal team had covered every angle. The profit projections were staggering. All she had to do was show up, walk through the neighborhood slated for demolition, and authorize the final phase. Her assistant Rachel appeared in the doorway. "Car's ready whenever you are. The site manager is already there with the full team." Victoria nodded, gathering her tablet and coat. "Let's go." The neighborhood was older than she'd realized from the aerial photographs. Trees lined the streets despite the neglected infrastructure. Children's toys dotted small yards. Someone had painted a mural on the side of a corner store. These weren't just buildings on a balance sheet. These were homes. The site manager, Bernie Hale, met her with the kind of obsequious smile that made Victoria's skin crawl. "Ms. Reckernigamasai. Whitmore, pleasure as always. We've prepared the full walkthrough. I think you'll be impressed with how smoothly the acquisition phase has gone." They walked through several buildings slated for the first wave of demolition. Bernie pointed out code violations and structural issues with barely concealed glee. Each problem another justification for tearing it all down. Victoria took notes, maintained her professional demeanor, tried not to think about the families who'd be displaced. Then they entered a building where renovation work was underway, temporary repairs to keep it habitable until the demolition date. Bernie was mid-sentence about electrical problems when Victoria heard a familiar voice. "I told you 3 times. The issue isn't the panel. Someone bypassed the ground fault protection. That's what's causing the intermittent failures." Victoria's head snapped up. There, kneeling beside an open electrical panel, was Henry Carter. He was wearing work clothes covered in dust, safety glasses pushed up on his forehead, explaining something to a younger apprentice with the patient tone of someone who genuinely wanted to teach. He hadn't seen her yet. "Mr. Carter, is it?" Bernie's voice cut through like a blade. "I don't recall asking for your opinion on the diagnostics. I hired you to follow instructions, not play engineer." Henry stood slowly, wiping his hands on a rag. "With respect, Mr. Hale, if you don't fix the ground fault issue, someone's going to get seriously hurt. These buildings are still occupied. These buildings are scheduled for demolition in 6 weeks. We're not investing in major electrical overhauls for tenants who are already relocating. 6 weeks is enough time for a child to get electrocuted," Henry said quietly, firmly. That's when he saw Victoria. Recognition flashed across his face, followed immediately by confusion and something else. A dawning, uncomfortable realization. He saw her expensive suit, the deference Bernie showed her, the tablet in her hands with the company logo. "You're the CEO," he said flatly. Not a question. Victoria felt the ground shift beneath her. "Henry, Ms. Whitmore," Bernie interrupted, clearly annoyed by the disruption. "I apologize for this employee's insubordination. I'll handle it." "Give us a moment," Victoria said, her executive voice brooking no argument. Bernie's eyebrows rose, but he retreated, taking the apprentice with him. Victoria and Henry faced each other across the exposed electrical panel like a chasm. "I didn't know," she said first. "When I saw you here, I didn't know you'd be working on this project. But you knew what the project was." His voice was level, but she could hear the disappointment underneath. "Tearing down this neighborhood, Pushing out people who can't afford to go anywhere else. It's not that simple, isn't it? Henry's laugh was bitter. The night we met, you were just Victoria. Someone having a bad day. Someone who seemed kind. Was that real? Or were you just… What? Researching how the other half lives. It was real, Victoria said fiercely. That was the most real I've been in years. But this is real too. Henry gestured at the building around them. These families. My work. The fact that in 6 weeks, this whole neighborhood gets erased, so people like you can build luxury condos that'll sit empty as investment properties. Victoria flinched. Every word was true. I'm trying to make it better than it could be. There's relocation assistance, fair market compensation, fair market value for a neighborhood you deliberately undervalued. Henry's expertise showed. I've seen the assessment reports. I know what these buildings are actually worth, and it's twice what your company's offering. Before Victoria could respond, Bernie's voice echoed from the hallway. Whitmore, we're on a schedule. I have to go, Victoria said, hating herself. Yeah, Henry said quietly. You do. She walked away, feeling his eyes on her back, the weight of judgment she deserved. The rest of the site inspection passed in a blur. Bernie droned on about timelines and profit margins. All Victoria could think about was Henry's face when he realized who she was, what she represented. That evening, Emma asked her father about the fancy lady they'd met. Henry struggled to explain that sometimes people aren't who you think they are, that the world is more complicated than it seems. Emma, with a child's uncomplicated morality, asked if the lady was mean now. No, Henry said honestly. She's not mean. She's trapped in a system, sweetheart. And I don't know if she knows how to get out. 3 days later, Bernie Hale summoned Henry to his office with bad news barely concealed as concern. There'd been an incident. Electrical fire in one of the buildings. Minor, quickly contained, but someone had to be held accountable. And unfortunately, Henry had been the last one to work on that building's electrical system. Henry knew immediately what was happening. I logged a report about the ground fault issue. I submitted 3 separate work orders requesting approval to fix it properly. Work orders I denied because we're not making unnecessary investments in condemned buildings, Bernie said smoothly. But there's no record of you warning about fire hazards specifically. And now we have a fire. The board's going to want someone to blame, Mr. Carter. I'm trying to help you here. Help me how? Resign quietly. I'll arrange a decent reference, maybe a severance package. But if you fight this, if you make noise, I'll make sure you never work maintenance in this city again. Henry left that office knowing he was being framed, knowing Bernie was covering for corner cutting that had nearly killed people. He also knew he had no power to fight it. No lawyer. No union. Just his word against management. Victoria learned about the fire during an emergency board meeting. The directors were furious about the PR exposure, demanding immediate disciplinary action. Bernie had already prepared his scapegoat, a maintenance worker who'd allegedly ignored safety protocols. The employee's name? Victoria asked, though she already knew. Henry Carter, low-level tech. He's being terminated effective immediately. Victoria's mind raced. She'd reviewed the maintenance logs personally after the site visit, curious about Henry's work. His reports were meticulous. Every safety concern documented. Every request for resources carefully justified. Bernie had denied every single one. I want a full investigation before any terminations, Victoria said. The board erupted. This was a minor employee in a minor incident. Protecting him looked weak. It opened them to liability. It delayed the project. Marcus Reed, who'd somehow maneuvered his way onto the board of directors, spoke up with poisonous helpfulness. I think what concerns us, Victoria, is whether your judgment on this matter might be compromised. I understand you have a personal connection to this employee. The room went silent. Victoria felt the trap closing. Marcus had done his homework, found out about the restaurant somehow. Now he was using it against her, painting her as emotionally unstable, unable to separate personal feelings from business decisions. My judgment, Victoria said coldly, is that we investigate thoroughly before firing someone who's been filing safety reports that were systematically ignored. Unless we want those reports becoming public record in a wrongful termination lawsuit. That got their attention. Victoria pressed her advantage. I'm ordering a full audit of this project. Maintenance logs, safety reports, every corner that was cut to stay under budget. If Henry Carter is responsible, the evidence will prove it. But if he's not, if someone else is covering their mistakes, we need to know before this becomes a much bigger problem. This is highly irregular, one director protested. So is a fire in a building we're supposed to be maintaining, Victoria shot back. Rachel, get our forensics team on this. I want preliminary findings in 24 hours. As she left the boardroom, she heard Marcus's voice carrying through the door. She's losing control. This emotional decision-making is exactly what we were worried about. The investigation took 3 days. Victoria's forensics team pulled maintenance logs, work orders, tenant interviews. The evidence was damning. Bernie Hale had been cutting corners for months, denying repairs, falsifying safety reports. The fire was caused by the exact issue Henry had warned about repeatedly. Victoria called an emergency board meeting. The directors shifted uncomfortably as she presented the findings. I'm recommending Bernie Hale's termination and a full review of our acquisition practices, Victoria said. We offer fair market value and extended relocation timelines. That'll cost millions, someone objected. Less than the lawsuit when the media finds out we've been defrauding families, Victoria countered. Marcus leaned forward. Or we settle quietly. Pay Carter off. Continue as planned. Why risk everything over one employee? Victoria looked at him, seeing clearly for the first time. The man who'd tested her vulnerability at a restaurant, who now wanted to destroy a neighborhood and frame an innocent father. No, she said. We do this right, or not at all. I'm calling for a vote. She won by 3 votes. Bernie Hale was terminated that afternoon. Henry Carter received a formal apology and a senior maintenance position at triple his previous salary. Henry stared at the letter, Emma reading over his shoulder. Does this mean we're okay, Daddy? She asked. Yeah, sweetheart. I think we're going to be okay. But he didn't reach out to Victoria. The gulf still felt too wide. Victoria restructured the development project with fair assessments and genuine community input. Marcus undermined her at every turn, spreading rumors. Board members listened. There was talk of removing her. You're going to lose your position, Rachel said one late night. I know, Victoria replied. You could compromise, keep your seat. Victoria thought about Henry's quiet dignity, about doing the right thing even when it cost everything. No, Victoria said. I couldn't. The vote came 1 month later. Victoria defended every decision without apology. She lost by 1 vote. Marcus celebrated before she'd left the building. Victoria cleaned out her office, Rachel helping pack boxes with tears streaming. What will you do? Rachel asked. I'll figure it out, Victoria said. She drove to the neighborhood that night. Families were still there, lights in kitchen windows. She'd bought them time. Victoria found herself at the same restaurant, table 12 occupied. She sat alone, ordered wine, stared at nothing. Excuse me. Is this seat taken? Victoria looked up. Henry stood there with Emma beside him, both looking uncertain but hopeful. Emma was holding a folded paper crane. I made this for you, Emma said shyly. Daddy said you had a bad day. How did you? Victoria started. Rachel called me, Henry admitted. Told me what happened. What you did. He was quiet for a moment. I'm sorry I judged you. You had every right to judge me. Maybe. But I also know what it's like to lose everything because you did the right thing. Henry gestured to the empty chair. Would you like some company? Victoria felt tears threatening and didn't care. I would. Not hurry. Henry sat down, Emma scrambling into the chair beside him. The waiter appeared, confused but game, adding settings for 2 more. I heard you got a new job, Victoria said. Senior maintenance supervisor, Henry confirmed. Better pay. Benefits. The kind of stability Emma deserves. He paused. Thank you for that. I didn't do it as a favor. The investigation proved you were right about everything. I know. But you could have buried it. Protected the company instead of the truth. You chose not to. Henry's eyes met hers. That cost you everything. Not everything, Victoria said, looking around the table. I still have a seat at this table. Emma beamed. We're celebrating. Daddy got his new job and you were brave. And on my job was arguing, I don't feel very brave, Victoria admitted. The bravest people never do, Henry said softly. They just do what's right and deal with the consequences. They ordered dinner. Emma narrated her menu choices again, just like before, and Victoria found herself laughing. Really laughing. The weight she'd been carrying for weeks lifted slightly. What will you do now? Henry asked. I honestly don't know. For the first time in 20 years, I don't have a plan. Victoria smiled ruefully. It's terrifying, but also kind of freeing, Henry suggested. Maybe. Victoria looked at him curiously. How did you do it? When Emma's mother left, when you lost everything, how did you keep going? Henry glanced at his daughter, who was absorbed in folding her own napkin into crane shapes. I had something worth fighting for. Someone who needed me to be better than my circumstances. He looked back at Victoria. You'll find your reason too. They talked through dinner about everything and nothing. Victoria told them about Rachel's fierce loyalty and the board members who'd voted to keep her, despite the pressure. Henry shared Emma's latest school triumph and his plans for the new position. Emma fell asleep against her father's shoulder halfway through dessert. When the check came, Victoria reached for it automatically. Henry started to protest, then paused. Actually, he said carefully, maybe tonight we split it? Equal partners. Victoria understood what he was offering. Not charity, not superiority, just equality. I'd like that. They divided the bill exactly in half. Walked out into the cool night together. Henry needed to get Emma home. Victoria had nowhere particular to be. Will you be okay? Henry asked. The same question he'd asked the first night. This time, Victoria's answer was different. I think I will be. Eventually. Emma stirred, mumbled sleepily. Will we see you again, Miss Victoria? Victoria looked at Henry. He looked back, and something unspoken passed between them. An acknowledgement. A possibility? Yes, Victoria said. I think you will. Good, Emma said, satisfied, and went back to sleep. Henry shifted his daughter's weight, prepared to head to the bus stop. Then he paused. Victoria? That question I asked the first night. About sharing the table? Yes, I meant it. Anytime you need a seat, it's yours. Victoria felt something break open in her chest, something she'd kept locked for years. Only if you promise you won't leave when things get difficult. Me. I'm okay. I'm a single dad who just got framed for arson and lost his only job, Henry said with a slight smile. Difficult doesn't scare me anymore. They exchanged numbers this time. Made tentative plans for coffee later that week. Parted ways with Emma's paper crane in Victoria's pocket. A small weight that felt like hope. Victoria drove home slowly, mind wandering over everything that had happened. She'd lost her position, her salary, her corporate power, but she'd kept something more important, the ability to look at herself in the mirror. The knowledge that when it mattered, she'd chosen people over profit. Her phone buzzed. A text from Rachel. 3 board members just called. They want to talk about forming a new company. Something with actual values. You interested? Victoria smiled. Maybe she had a plan after all. 3 months later, Victoria worked in a small office overlooking the neighborhood she'd saved. 3 board members had joined her to build something new, a development company prioritizing community alongside profit. Harder, slower, less lucrative, but real. Henry stopped by during lunch breaks, sometimes bringing Emma. They'd become friends first, carefully, then more, in small increments that felt earned. Emma called Victoria her almost mom, making both adults tear up and laugh. They hadn't rushed. Both had too much at stake. But they were building something real. On the anniversary of their first meeting, Henry reserved table 12. Emma was with her grandmother. Victoria arrived early, nervous. Henry was already there in a tie Emma had clearly chosen. Hi, Victoria said. Heidi. He pulled out her chair. I wanted to thank you for saying yes when I asked to share a table, for staying when you found out who I was, for choosing what was right. You changed mine first, Victoria said. You saw me when I was invisible. They ordered the same meals as that first night. No Emma to deflect the intensity. Just two people who'd found each other in darkness. "I have something for you," Henry said, pulling out a small box. Inside was a bracelet of folded paper cranes, laminated to preserve them. Emma helped. She said you needed your own flock to remind you you're not alone. Victoria put it on with shaking hands. "It's perfect." They finished dinner talking about Victoria's new company, Henry's engineering plans, Emma's birthday party, the future taking shape. When the check came, they split it without discussion. Equal partners. Walking out, Henry caught her hand. "Would you like to share the table? Not just tonight, but always." Victoria thought about her journey. The humiliation that brought her here. The kindness that saved her. The choices that cost everything and gave her something infinitely more valuable. "Yes," Victoria said. "I would like that very much." They stood under the streetlights where their story began. Two people from different worlds who'd found common ground. They had scars, struggles, a past that couldn't be erased. But they also had each other. And at a table, always waiting. That question. Simple, earnest, impossible to refuse. Had changed everything. Want to share the table? It wasn't just about dinner. It was about making room for someone unexpected. About choosing connection over isolation. Victoria squeezed Henry's hand, Emma's paper cranes dancing from her wrist. Tomorrow would bring challenges. But tonight, she wasn't alone at table 12. Tonight and every night forward, she had a place where she belonged.